First of all, I want to thank the Iowa League of Cities for giving IEDA and IFA this opportunity to talk about our very exciting and innovative Iowa Thriving Communities initiative. So I'm Ashley Jarrett. I'm the Communications Director at the Iowa Finance Authority. I have my esteemed colleague, Derek Folden, as our Tax Credit Manager at IFA IEDA, along with me today. And we'll be just giving an overview of the second annual Iowa Thriving Communities initiative. Okay, so before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the application process, which I'm sure you're all intrigued about, I like to just start the conversation with an overview of why we developed that Thriving Communities initiative. Of course, there's certainly a housing need in the state of Iowa. That's no surprise to any community throughout the state that we talk to on a daily basis. But before we talk about the different needs, it's always a great reminder to start off and remind ourselves who we're talking about. I know a lot of us get into the details of what income brackets we're talking about, what different housing programs we could potentially use to develop housing for those incomes. But it's so important to really remember that there's faces and families behind those incomes. So we know in the state of Iowa that nearly 40% of renters and 16% of homeowners pay more than 30% of their income on housing. And the large majority of those that are housing cost burdened are these essential services up on the screen right now. The people that we all see every day and rely heavily on: grocery store clerks, daycare providers, ambulance drivers, pharmacy aides, nursing assistants, you name it. There are people, our friends and family, that we rely on in the community. So before we get too far into it, we always just like to frame up the conversation that way. So the need for housing in the state, we really like to talk about it as being two or threefold, really. First of all, is that housing cost burdened situation that I just mentioned. And second of all is just the need for additional housing units in the state. Our recently released Iowa profile data shows us that we need about 24,000 new housing units throughout the state by the year 2030 to be able to meet the housing demand throughout the state. What's interesting about that is for years and years, we're used to really talking about the need on the multifamily side. However, this report really shows that the need for single family housing is very strong by 2030. So of that 24,000 number I just mentioned on the previous slide, about 17,000 of those need to be single family units to be able to meet the need in our communities going forward. So the good news there is that we are projected to meet that demand. We just really need to look at making sure that we're building the right type of housing for the right income levels. Remember, I said those people and those different occupations earlier, and in the right locations. So IFA IEDA is really taking a data-driven approach in our funding decisions to be able to do that. So the information on your screen right now is from that Iowa profile that I mentioned. It's available at iowafinance.com/Iowa profile. If you haven't already taken a look at that, today's webinar is not an Iowa profile, but we could probably do a whole webinar on that. I really encourage you to check it out. There's not only state housing forecasts on there, but also county, in addition to housing and economic and demographic and quality of life information on a really detailed level down to the census tract, city, county, place level, to be able to pull information for grants or reports in your communities. So what we're looking at here is really showing the kind of the housing sandwich need here. On the right-hand side of the screen shows the big need of housing for the highest income level for single family. On the left-hand side of the screen shows the need for the lowest income level. And I always like to make a point where, while of course on the right-hand side, it's certainly a larger number, the left hand of the screen is just equally as important, because those are the folks in our community that are housing cost burdened, that are the most vulnerable. They might not have family or friends to rely on like a lot of us do if the car repair issue or a medical expense would happen to come up. They certainly are housing cost burdened and are highly at risk there. So here are the needs at the statewide basis. Again, I really encourage you to check out the county housing forecast available at the Iowa Profile website as well. As I mentioned, we do have a bit of good news based on the current projections and forecasts for building permits. We are expected to meet that 24,000 number by 2030. However, that just means our work is just beginning, really. That gives us the opportunity to make sure that we're making data-driven decisions on where housing is being built, for what occupations, and make sure that there's some strategic reasoning behind it. So with that said, we have a variety of housing needs, not only on the housing cost burden side, as well as the additional housing units needed side, but of course then on the aging housing resources throughout our state. We need to make sure we're making investments there. So lots on our plate. No one entity or organization will be able to solve it all on their own. Of course, at IFA IEDA, we have a variety of different programs to assist with housing programs, but not all of them. We don't have all of the answers. So this really opens up a really exciting chance for us to really think strategically and innovatively to have a public-private effort from communities as well as employers in those communities and just Iowans that really care about the prosperity of their communities. So with that said, that was kind of my lead up to our Iowa Thriving Communities initiative. It's kind of interesting. I like to tell the story of how this came about. It's a really collaborative effort. Of course, IFA and IEDA are all under one house now. We have kind of a committee or a team internally of several folks that really have made this possible. And really to make sure that we're talking with communities, that they're telling us what their needs are and how they're going above and beyond to really make sure that they're welcoming for housing for all income levels in their communities. So Iowa Thriving Communities, again, this is the second annual round of this. It really is an opportunity to provide communities that are leveraging innovative methods to attract housing for their workforce with a chance to be recognized for their efforts. So our goal through Iowa Thriving Communities is twofold. One is to give them a microphone. There's communities doing such inspiring, innovative work to welcome housing for their workforce. We want to make sure that that's used as a model for other communities to spur new ideas, to really open up the dialogue and the conversations with each other when it comes to housing. As well as, of course, the incentive piece, which everyone's always really intrigued about, that Derek will talk a little bit more about next. So I'll throw it to Derek now.
Thanks, Ashley. So Ashley's right. This is really, I mean, the real big benefit, big intent here is the ability to showcase. I mean, we want these communities out there to showcase what they've been doing to raise the bar on attracting housing for all for their community. And these ideas are amazing. I was just astonished last round at how many ideas came out, and you can't think of these kind of things in one office or one area. So it's great that these communities are also sharing the ideas. So communities are not keeping ideas themselves and sharing it. Now, that being said, this is competitive. So we are looking for a process that will be constantly raising the bar on what we're expecting, what's being expected in Iowa by developers, but also by communities and for residents. So this is intentionally competitive in the sense that last year we had 37 applications, and we selected 11 or fewer, 11 for this designation. And the idea is just really to keep the bar high and to make sure that we're qualifying and looking at what's happening out in the communities and sharing those ideas. So part of this will be the incentive for the communities, besides the sharing of ideas, will be that we are adding some scoring incentives, as we did this year, for two of our flagship housing programs. So the federal housing tax credit program and the workforce housing tax credit program. I'm looking at Ashley's earlier slides. You'll see the kind of income bands that we were looking to really incentivize, and these programs cover between the 30% AMI up to 100% AMI areas for the most part. So it's really a great way for this to be paired with Iowa Thriving Communities to help these communities as well. Next slide, please. So as you said, these scoring incentives does not guarantee an award, but it does make the community and their priorities much more competitive out there. So if the priorities are to work on the downtown housing or to work on a new subdivision, it definitely helps raise those priorities up a little bit within the scoring of these programs. Both programs are highly competitive. But in the end, we do end up creating a few thousand units each year with these programs across the states. We'd like to be sure these dollars and these credits are being allocated appropriately across the state across the state to help build projects that are meaningful for communities and for the residents who live in these communities. These programs are very heavily dependent on the developers. So typically for developers out there, it's easier to do business where they're already doing business. But really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to stretch the developers and push them out into other communities that are demonstrating and thriving and demonstrating that they're ready for business. They're ready to be attracting new developments and helping their residents out as well. So next slide. One of the programs is the Federal Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. That's our flagship affordable housing program on the IFA side. This is a competitive program. We get an annual allocation each year from the federal government based on per capita. It ends up being about $10 million in 10-year credits, which is basically $100 million worth of awards. And we can award usually about 10 projects per year. So 10 projects across all of Iowa is not that much, but the impact is huge. It is creating 450 to 500 new units of affordable housing each year. And it's a major investment in the community. These are very expensive projects that are well built and provide a long-term affordable option for residents. These units can be, as kind of examples on the right there, they can be anything from like historic rehabilitation of a building, such as the Call Lofts in Davenport, or it can be a 2 or 3 story apartment building, or it can be townhouse buildings. It can be different types of styles of buildings that can fit in different communities as well. The other program that we incentivize is the workforce housing tax credits. This program is funded by the state. It is $35 million allocated each year, split between large and small cities. The large cities, for the most part, are any city within the 11 most populous counties. There are some exceptions, of course, out there, but generally that's how we split those half and half. This program has no restrictions on income and no restrictions on rent or sale price. So these do allow you to have rental or sale. We see a lot of different styles, whether they're apartment type buildings or whether they're duplex, townhomes, single family as well. And as Ashley mentioned, there's a huge need for home ownership. So this also allows for that as well. So we are incentivizing this year additional points, additional scoring for single family duplex row home that are owner occupied as well. For the large communities, urban areas, it's up to $15,000 per unit in tax credit, plus a sales tax rebate on the materials that are purchased within the state of Iowa. And same thing for the small communities, rural areas, it's up to $30,000 per unit tax credit plus a sales tax rebate. And really the intent here is to incentivize housing across the state. We've worked in 65 different counties so far for workforce housing tax credits, and we're hoping to get to all 99. So this is a huge part of that initiative, working with Iowa Thriving Communities. Okay, let's talk about thriving communities now. So there are 6 categories that we are scoring on, and the communities that are the most successful are generally going to be well-rounded in each of these categories. We want communities that are excelling in these areas and really thinking about how they can essentially improve, be innovative, be creative, and provide housing for all in their community. So the first category is the financial support category. Communities just were looking for creativity here. So how do you structure your fee structures for certain types of development, or how are you using your TIF, or are you focusing on certain development incentives that might help with maybe downtown upper story housing, or maybe higher density housing, or maybe single family development, whatever it is, as long as you're really being creative and innovative, or being focused on what you're trying to accomplish when it comes to financing. But there's a number of ways of doing it, but just really looking for intentionality with your financing and also being developer friendly. We want people who, we want communities who are developer friendly, who can attract the development that can in turn help your residents as well. On the planning and assessment side, any good innovation and creativity is great, but really having goals set and a plan set and moving forward to accomplish those goals is very important. So I guess the biggest pitfall is a lot of communities, I'm not sure if you heard Jimmy T talk before, but if you have a great plan and you spend the money and spend the time putting the plan together, but then it sits on the shelf, it is meaningless. So we're looking for communities that are actively creating plans, updating plans, modifying plans, and working to achieve those plans, taking steps on what action steps have been taken. How are you addressing those? Is it a thoughtful addressing of this to help the community overall and basically helping to accomplish the housing for all and the needs of the communities? Okay, on the next slide, target neighborhood. So in communities, there's areas sometimes where we're looking for certain parts to be developed. So let's say the focus is downtown, or maybe it's a new subdivision you're working on. We want to hear more about why that area was selected. So looking for opportunities for developers. So what opportunities are there out there? What lots are available? What areas are you trying to redevelop? Why are you trying to redevelop them? What incentives are you placing on those areas to help redevelop? Is there land available and ready for development, or is there a larger plan for the community? What are you working on essentially? For the urban communities that are larger, we definitely need to have a target area because your communities are too large. We can't have 100,000 population and have the whole city be that area. So it really needs to be focused into an area you're trying to work on. For the smaller communities, it's optional, but we're really looking for just what your intent is for development and your plan going forward. One big thing to include is equitable and inclusive. I mean, we want sites and areas where people actually want to live. I mean, it's close to amenities and close to areas where these folks can be part of the community and thrive. Okay, for me, this next one is probably one of the biggest ones, partnerships. So we don't expect the city to do it all on their own. I mean, this is not the city's job. This is Iowa Thriving Communities. It's not Iowa Thriving Cities. So we want the cities and the partners in the cities to work together to accomplish something. That's how the best things get done in communities. So last year, the most successful applicants had partnerships that included business leaders and local nonprofits and the county and school districts, and everyone's in for housing. Everyone's in for making their community better. Everyone's in to try and invest and essentially raise the bar. So it's not one person's job to do community development. It's not one person's job to do housing development. It's everyone's job. And one of my kind of favorite stories from last year's round was a community that had a hospital CEO. And part of the CEO's job description literally was to help improve the housing in the community. I mean, this is something where it's not something you can create in the sense that we're just making this part of it, but for his job description, it was to be part of the community and to increase and improve the housing in the community. Overall, just looking for engagement. I mean, partnerships and engagement is huge. So for workforce attraction, this is a little bit of an extension of partnerships, but kind of focusing more on the employers in town. I mean, a lot of times we'll hear from employers saying, well, we'd love to expand, or we'd love to maybe bring a new business to town, but gee, we just need housing, or wish there was housing. And it's fine to be supportive and to serve on panels or to say, yeah, we need housing, but this is looking one step farther. I mean, what are your local employers doing to actually get involved, to be engaged, to invest in their communities? So instead of just on the sidelines saying, yeah, we're supportive, or we send a letter in, we're looking for employers and communities that are connecting and, again, raising the bar for both workforce attraction and retention, quality of life, sponsoring childcare, helping with down payment, just different things that might be engaging and really getting these employers involved instead of just saying, yeah, we need housing. Well, step up to the plate and help out. The last category is kind of our catch-all. We call it thriving community. For the better or worse, I guess, for lack of term, it's kind of the other category, all the other interesting and innovative ideas that's being done by the community. So what's being done about public safety or arts, or is there a school program you're working with to help with the trades, or is there other things with childcare that's being done, or broadband? So just anything above and beyond and creative that's being done to enhance the quality of life within the community, but also to help bring housing for all again and make the community thriving.
I'm going to pop in with just one comment on this one. For those communities that are familiar with the application from last year, this category is probably the biggest change or tweak that we made. A little insider baseball you'll get from attending the webinar today. We actually have worked with our friends at HHS, DOT, DPS for some questions around safe, healthy, culturally vibrant communities. So you'll see a little bit more meat in this category. And we'd really invite you to really tell us about those other characteristics, because we know that it's not all about housing. We have to be talking about the community as a whole. So we're really interested, while this thriving designation gets you incentive points and we talk a lot about housing, we're really interested in all of the great things your community has going on as a whole.
Okay, so just jumping back a little bit to the program timelines for the incentives that we're offering with the Iowa Thriving Communities. So the two programs I mentioned were the Federal Housing Tax Credit Program and the Iowa Workforce Housing Tax Credit Program. Both of them have some similarities, but also some differences I kind of brushed on a little bit up here, but this is kind of table to flesh it out a little bit. So the types of housing we can build, we can definitely do multifamily, single family for both. Workforce housing is geared a little more towards smaller units. You can do upper story rehab as well, upper story construction of units as well. The federal program is only for rental. So it has to be rental. It's a long-term rental that's at least 15 to 30 years of a program. The workforce side is flexible. It can be for rental or for home ownership. Either one's fine. We are incentivizing home ownership right now, but both of them are great and acceptable, and there's a need in different communities as well. In terms of occupancy, so the federal program can be family or senior units. The workforce, hence the name workforce, we are looking for mostly kind of family and those that are in the main workforce area of the population. Income limits. On the federal side, there are income limits, generally between 30% and 80% AMIs who we serve. So looking back at the tables that Ashley provided before, it hits a lot of those occupations and people in your communities that live there currently that could be in need of in housing. On the workforce side, there are no income limits. So typically we're looking for kind of that entry-level market rate into mid-level market rate. We do not do luxury housing. We're not doing half-acre lots. When we're looking for those that are in need of assistance to kind of help housing work, and not those that can probably help themselves as much. In terms of property sizes, typically for on the federal side, we're looking at 24 to 60 units, some a little bigger than that. On the workforce housing side, they can be as small as 2 units, which is great for rural communities. Maybe you just need to have 2, 3, 4 units done in the community, really to help kind of start things up to 60, 100, couple hundred units we had last year. The award amounts for federal, so there's much more in terms of income restrictions and requirements and costs. So we do allow up to $13 million, which is a huge investment. So very highly sought after. We do about 10 of these per year, so it is coveted across the state. Workforce, it's up to $1 million. Also very coveted, also very competitive. We do 60 awards, but we also receive more than double applications. And we do spread those out, of course, between rural and urban. So it's a great mix, but we'd love to see more communities come in and apply for that as well. In terms of timing, the federal program, as you can imagine, is a little bit slower. So the applications are due usually in April. We announce in July the awards. And so for the incentive for next year, if you become an Iowa Thriving Community designee, then you would receive incentive for this timeline, essentially for 2025. So looking at by the time they get awarded in July of next year, on the federal side, they're really placing their units in service in 2027, which seems like forever, but just the timing of that is how it works. On the workforce side, it's a little bit faster. We make our applications come in usually in June of next year. The awards are done in August. By kind of winter, they're starting construction and planning, and by that following fall, they're hopefully placing in service and providing units into your community. In terms of awards for the Iowa Thriving Communities, we are, again, limited. It's very competitive. So for the federal program, we are designating up to 1 urban and up to 3 rural communities. For the workforce housing program, we're designating up to 3 urban and up to 8 rural. Now, some of those overlap. So a rural could be rural for both federal and for workforce, or one or the other. So it doesn't have to be exclusive, but those are our limits and targets on what we're going to designate for communities. I think it's you, Ashley.
Oh, sure. So just a few high-level headlines about eligibility. I know last year we had some questions on, is this just for urban or just for rural communities? It's for everyone. So we'd love to see applications from as many communities as possible. Derek mentioned last year, our first year, we had no idea what to expect, but had almost 40 communities apply. Now, those communities that were designated last year are not eligible to reapply this year. We'll handle waiver or extensions kind of at an as needed basis if that is needed. But we do encourage communities that applied last year that weren't designated to certainly apply, as well as other communities that have not applied at all for the Thriving Communities designation. One of the great things about the program is as we have some years under our belt, we're going to be building kind of an archive of stories and successes and what we've seen that's been really, truly innovative throughout the state. So let's see. Basically, the slide is just all about both urban and rural are eligible to apply. So if you have questions about that, let us know. The one difference, as Derek mentioned, with urban, we do request the actual targeted neighborhood area because we won't be awarding a designation for an entire community. For instance, we had several last year, such as Cedar Rapids and Dubuque that we had, and Muscatine pick the more targeted area. Okay, so let's talk about last year's winners. This year, it's a little bit easier to talk about because we have some actual communities that have been awarded in the past the designation. So you'll see on their screen 11 communities that were designated in the inaugural round. Now, not all of these were awarded both program incentive points. A couple of them were, but you'll see which ones were awarded workforce housing tax credit or low income housing tax credit incentive points. The application will ask you which one or both that you're applying for. And if you do make it into the finalist round, the team does ask you kind of a little bit more about why and what your data shows you for the need for those various income levels in your community. So with that, Derek shared you one example with the Cruston Hospital CEO that we just loved that little anecdote that the need for housing and making sure that there's housing in the community, not only for the hospital's employees, but just for the vitality of the community was in his job description. We have lots of other anecdotes from these communities, and I will share afterwards. Hopefully the league can help me share the link out, but we've created a whole web page on IFA's website for Iowa Thriving Communities. We have several videos spotlighting last year's winners, not winners, designees, awardees. I need to have a better word for it. But last year's Thriving Communities, as well as a contact listing for those communities. Because part of the deal with those designations last year is they had to agree to talk with other communities and share their initiatives. So if something spurs your interest, certainly feel free to reach out to them. So I'll fly through these slides pretty quickly. There's just a few of them to kind of get you thinking a little bit about the types of things we saw last year. So Jefferson had lots and lots of major employer cooperation. And just one other note on this, from my perspective, I was actually one of the panelists last year. I think across the board, the weakest category among communities was certainly that workforce and employer partnerships piece. I just don't know that we were clear maybe in the application last year. We're trying to be clearer this year that we're actually looking for tangible things that have been done. So has your community partnered with an employer to actually build housing, or like Derek mentioned, relocation assistance or down payment assistance? What are employers doing to have some skin in the game and to be problem solvers along with you? So that was something that caught our attention with Jefferson, among a slew of other things. Manning had this really great quote that we all loved. First of all, those people are us. So often we hear really the NIMBYism point of oh, those people shouldn't live near me. They'll affect my property values or whatever it might be. And they certainly say that, you know what, those people are us. They're all of us. They're our community members and they matter. So that was certainly important to us to see that they were all in and being welcoming to housing for all income levels in their community. The other thing on the financial end of things was really interesting to us. They put it in perspective really nicely. that the city of Manning committed $1.2 million towards their new subdivision. And that doesn't necessarily seem like a lot of money, but for a town of their size, that's like comparing it to Carroll self-funding a $10 million project, or Des Moines self-funding a $242 million housing development. So just things like that that really show the huge financial impact, or whatever category it is. If you could really help us really see your story, because it's all about storytelling and thriving communities to welcome developers to your community. We try to help you do that as much as possible. That works really, really well. Muscatine also did a great job. We pulled out several that had that kind of good workforce partnerships, employer partnerships. Muscatine had a lot going on, so we kind of put several bullet points here. For instance, they created a brand new housing navigator position to help folks find housing. And then they had several pilot projects going on that we thought was really innovative and really showcased their willingness to try new things to solve the housing need issue. Dubuque had some great things going on the financial incentives component to incent developers to come to their area. And then Oskaloosa, we understand not everyone necessarily has a Musco in their backyard, but Musco and Cloudvolve both did tremendous things in regards to actually helping to build some subdivisions in their community for their workforce, and have really had literally a seat at the table when they're talking about their current and future housing and growth needs. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into the timeline for this year. So the application is open as we speak today. It opened in mid-February. So you can go to iowagrants.gov to kind of check out the application and begin the process. The application deadline is May 15th. So we really encourage you to start working on your application, because last year we found, you would need some certain things from city council meetings, perhaps, or making sure everyone is on the same page with the application. So it does take a while to complete the application successfully. The week of July 8th, we are committed to having the in-person finalist pitches after the team reviews the applications received. And then we plan to announce the 2025 Thriving Communities the week of July 15th. Now, one of the requirements of the designation is attendance at the Housing Iowa Conference, September 3rd through the 4th, and that is back in Des Moines this year. So again, additional information is on our website, iowafinance.com, as well as if you want to go straight just to the application link, it's at iowagrants.gov.